Welcome to the Frontier Podcast, where we take the internet's best tech articles and transform them into audio so that you can enjoy them on the go. We post new episodes every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning. Be sure to subscribe to our channels on YouTube and iTunes, or visit us at tfpodcast.io. If you would like to help support our show, we'd really appreciate it. Visit our Patreon and donate. All of those links will be listed below. Today's episode is brought to you by Presence Media. They are a Colorado-based SEO and web design firm. Presence Media creates beautifully modern websites that effectively attract new customers for their clients. Visit them at presencemediadenver.com. That link will be listed below. Today's article was written by Ryan Schmeiser. Ryan graduated magna cum laude from the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania with a degree in finance and entrepreneurship. Today's episode is titled Eponymous Laws as Persuasion Tools and Other Tricks for Robbing Walmart. If you'd like to read the original article, including the embedded images, you can find it on medium.com. We'll have that link listed below. Eponymous Laws as Persuasion Tools and Other Tricks for Robbing Walmart. On the effects of the authority principle. 1. How would you design the perfect crime to steal 16 cases of Bud Light from a Walmart in broad daylight? Think about it for a minute. That's a lot of beer. Too much to sneak into a bag or hide under your shirt. Too heavy to transport in a hurry or carry out unseen through a back door. What if you had to do it on a budget of under $50? That's not enough to pay off security guards or coordinate an inside job. It's certainly not enough to buy some Mission Impossible one-through Rogue Nation face-changing prosthetic. Never gets old, never see it coming. And what if you had to pull off the robbery by walking out the front door? Seems hard enough to do once. Well, a modern-day Frank Abagnale pulled off this feat not once, but 4 times, using nothing more than a t-shirt and a hat. The secret? He dressed like a delivery man. Nobody said a word. We are conditioned from a young age to defer to authority figures, parents, popes, and policemen, who help us navigate the world. This trust typically proves useful, so our brains developed a heuristic or shortcut that authority figures equals trustworthy source of infallible information. Quote, a multi-layered and widely accepted system of authority confers an immense advantage upon a society in resource production, trade, defense, expansion, and social control, end quote, says influence aficionado Professor Robert Cialdini. But like all heuristics, it can be manipulated. Authority acts as a cognitive stop sign, a ventriloquist overlord in the shadow world of our subconscious, saying, quote, do not reason beyond this point, end quote. The dangers of duty to authority are well known and well documented. Perhaps the most famous study on the matter was the 1961 Milgram experiment. In this experiment, an unknowing subject is told by an experimenter in a lab coat, i.e., an obvious authority figure, that a learner in an adjacent room will answer a series of questions. For each incorrect answer, the subject is to administer an electric shock, believed by the subject to be real, with each subsequent shock increasing in voltage. In reality, there were no shocks, but the learner in the adjacent room would make escalating sounds of pain, bang on the wall, and eventually go silent. Subjects that expressed a desire to halt the experiment were given a succession of verbal prods by the experimenter and typically continued. In the aftermath of the Holocaust, Milgram wished to understand whether people would commit atrocities because they were, as the odious turn of phrase has it, just following orders. The answer, in a word, yes. As Milgram summarized, quote, stark authority was pitted against the subject's strongest moral imperatives against hurting others, and, with the subject's ears ringing with the screams of the victims, authority won more often than not. The extreme willingness of adults to go to almost any lengths on the command of an authority constitutes the chief finding of the study. The experiment has been repeated many times across diverse societies with consistent results. Quote, ordinary people, simply doing their jobs, and without any particular hostility on their part, can become agents in a terrible destructive process. Relatively few people have the resources needed to resist authority, end quote. What's interesting is that the influence of the authority principle does not depend on earned authority. The mere appearance of authority is enough. Symbols are as good as substance. We trust anyone dressed as a doctor. Appearance of authority mixed with the halo effect, the tendency for an impression created in one area to influence opinion in another area, can lead to some amusing results. There was a TV ad in the 70s where Robert Young, an actor who played a doctor on a long-running TV series, spoke against the dangers of caffeine and recommended a caffeine-free brand of coffee. People believed him. The ad was widely successful. This man helped sell a lot of decaf coffee. Of course, the authority principle can be absurd when taken to its logical conclusion. There's a hilarious example in Dave Chappelle's classic stand-up performance, For What It's Worth. Dave asks a simple question. Why do we care so much about what celebrities have to say? We'll have that link listed below. It is quite easy to mislead folks using the authority principle, even in written context. In fact, it was Plato who famously said, quote, I have a theory that you can make any sentence seem profound by writing the name of a dead philosopher at the end of it, end quote. Well, no, actually he didn't. But you see my point. Words take a newfound gravitas when uttered by an authority figure. This effect is typically strengthened if the figure is long dead, well recognized, and the words are shrouded in mysticism, i.e., every major religious text ever. Eponymous laws, those rules, principles, and adages named for their inventors, are a particularly poignant subset of this phenomenon. Occam's razor, Moore's law, and the Pareto principle are useful explanatory frameworks. They are also effective persuasion triggers. These eponyms have the dual persuasion benefit of appealing to authority and evoking the inviolable sentiment that we typically associate with laws and rules. We are thus more likely to accept as valid the claims they are called to support. On the authority effect of rules, I wrote elsewhere, think back to your first day of preschool. How did you make sense of your new and chaotic surrounding? You abided by a list of rules that told you what and what not to do. Rule 1, raise your hand if you want to speak. Rule 2, etc. And you almost certainly did it unquestioningly, for you lacked the intellectual fortitude to question the constructs of the system. Don't feel bad, you were only 4 years old. Think back even earlier. What was your first encounter with dogmatic morality? Likely the 10 Commandments, that most immutable of lists. This pattern of critical rules handed down by authority repeats itself throughout our lives, and reinforces a habit loop that suggests positive feedback in exchange for some degree of amused validity and compliance. In other words, we are conditioned to show deference to things called rules and laws, in much the same way as we do to authority figures. Think of eponymous laws as semantic equivalents of authority figures. They are useful for explaining and useful for persuading. They are also quite fun. Here is a list of some of my favorites. Politics. Anna Karenina principle. Good things are more similar to each other than are bad things. Buffett's dictum. Praise by name, criticize by category. Campbell's law. The more any quantitative social indicator is used for social decision-making, the more subject it will be to corruption pressures, and the more apt it will be to distort and corrupt the social processes it is intended to monitor. Friedman's law. If you put the federal government in charge of the Sahara Desert, in 5 years, there'd be a shortage of sand. Gibson's law. For every PhD, there's an equal and opposite PhD. Napoleon's law. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. Peter's principle. In a hierarchy, every employee tends to rise to his level of incompetence. Sayre's law. In any dispute, the intensity of feeling is inversely proportional to the value of the stakes at issue. For example, the battle is so fierce because the prize is so small. Shapiro's law. Facts don't care about your feelings. Technology. Amara's law. We tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. Babe Ruth effect. Sometimes the frequency of correctness does not matter. It is the magnitude of correctness that matters. Irun's law. The cost of developing a new drug roughly doubles every 9 years. Sometimes referred to as reverse Moore's law. Lindy effect. For a certain class of non-perishables, like a technology or an idea, every additional day may imply a longer remaining life expectancy. Moore's law. The complexity of integrated circuits doubles every 24 months. Sawitsky's law. Every program attempts to expand until it can read mail. These days, this could be more accurately stated as to include messaging. Human stupidity. Angelou's law. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Benford's law of controversy. Passion is inversely proportional to the amount of real information available. Betteridge's law of headlines. Any headline which ends in a question mark can be answered by the word no. Cunningham's law. The best way to get the right answer on the internet is to not ask a question, it's to post the wrong answer. Dunning-Kruger effect. Cognitive bias in which unskilled individuals suffer from illusory superiority, mistakenly rating their ability much higher than average. This bias is attributed to a metacognitive inability of the unskilled to recognize their ineptitude. Godwin's law. As an outline discussion grows longer, the probability of a comparison involving Nazis or Hitler approaches 1. Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. Hitchens' razor. The burden of evidence in a debate rests on the claim maker, and the opponent can dismiss the claim if this burden is not met. Occam's razor. Among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. Sturgeon's law. 90% of everything is crap. Vinge's law. If you know exactly what a very smart agent would do, you must be at least that smart yourself. Beckstrom's law. The value of a network equals the net value added to each user's transactions conducted through that network, summed over all users. Dunbar's number. Theoretical cognitive limit to the number of people with whom one can maintain stable social relationships. No precise value has been proposed for Dunbar's number, but a commonly cited approximation is 150. Metcalfe's law. The value of a system grows as approximately as the square of the number of users of the system. Reed's law. The utility of large networks, particularly social networks, can scale exponentially with the size of the network. Stein's law. If something cannot go on forever, it will stop. Incentives. Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Mercury's law. It's easy to love the things that bring you money. Newhouse's law. Where orthodoxy is optional, orthodoxy will sooner or later be prescribed. Correll's law. To understand the object of an obscure plot, observe its consequences and ask who might have intended them. Sinclair's law. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it. Sutton's law. Go where the money is. The law is named after bank robber Willie Sutton, who, when asked why he robbed banks, is claimed to have answered, because that's where the money is. Productivity. Hofstadter's law. It always takes longer than you expect, even if you take into account Hofstadter's law. Pareto principle. For many phenomena, 80% of consequences stem from 20% of the causes. Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together. For a concept to become an eponymous law, it typically has to be novel, pithy, and broadly applicable. So these laws do often have genuinely useful explanatory power. But the persuasive nature of their appeal to authority can mean that, when called as evidence, the eponymous law may have more convincing power than its underlying concept. Say, for example, someone asks when we can expect self-driving cars. You could say something like, well, we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. So, while recent developments are encouraging, we are still a far way off. Furthermore, we know that the complexity of integrated circuits doubles every 24 months and should thus expect development to meander at first, before hitting some inflection point. Whereafter, self-driving cars will arrive rapidly. Given the shape of this curve, I would put their arrival somewhere between 8 to 12 years. Or you could similarly say, Amara's law suggests that we are overweighting recent developments in self-driving technology, and that, while impressive, the arrival of self-driving cars must wait for Moore's laws to catch up to our ambitions. So I put their arrival at 8 to 12 years. Now, this argument may not be remotely correct, but you can see how, in the latter version, the laws can act as semantic stop signs, language-based equivalents to the authority principle, saying, do not reason beyond this point. They sound authoritative and are thus more likely to prevent readers or listeners from considering the obvious next questions. They act as curiosity stoppers, criminals dressed as delivery men, telling you to suspend skepticism. Semantic stop signs are common. They appear every time someone justifies a position with the word God or socialism or democracy. They pop up in less obvious places like meetings with entrepreneurs and investors where someone says network effects or brand loyalty. The subtext is clear. If you are part of the tribe, you get it. If you think past this point, you are in the out group. Subtle group signaling may seem trivial, but the stakes could not be higher. Examples abound in debates around sensitive topics like discrimination and equality. Words like bigot or sexist or classist are semantic stop signs, telling you to halt the obvious continuation of the question and answer chain. Once a system has been labeled as such, to doubt the claim is to side with the enemy. To ask the obvious next question about the evidence or proof is to align with the outgroup. This makes it incredibly difficult to have honest conversations, even in cases where systems are indeed bigoted, sexist, and classist. To avoid being duped, one must ask the obvious next question. Your business has defensible barriers due to network effects, you say? Great. Describe to me how they work and prove their presence with the data. You hate the current unfair system and want to replace it with socialist democracy? Okay, I'm willing to listen. But you need to convince me with relevant examples of socialist democracy having worked in similar circumstances, or it having worked better than the current system. Shouting a semantic stop sign, i.e. socialist democracy or network effects, is not in itself a convincing answer. You have to show me the evidence. Personally, I've seldom been persuaded by a proposition's merits by someone yelling liberal democracy or artificial intelligence, even if they're wearing a lab coat, though I've often seen an audience nodding its head in response. These things tend to work, and eponymous laws may be extra effective due to 1. Referring to the name of an authority figure, 2. Literally calling themselves laws or some similar variant, and 3. Acting as semantic stop signs that force in-group, out-group signaling. So, with this information in hand, it is probably worth going on eBay now and buying a lab coat or a police uniform. Note, not legal advice. Wear the outfit next time you apply for a mortgage extension, go to a car dealership, or need to hit your monthly sales quota. Still not legal advice. Throw in a few eponymous laws to justify your positions. Maybe a semantic stop sign or two to neuter counterarguments. See if it improves your results. And be sure to ask the FedEx guy carrying 3 stereos and a puppy out of your building for proof of ID. Thanks for listening. You can find more episodes just like this at tfpodcast.io. We post new episodes every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning. That link will be listed below. Be sure to subscribe to our channels on YouTube and iTunes, or visit us at tfpodcast.io. If you would like to help support our show, we'd really appreciate it. Visit our Patreon and donate. All of those links will be listed below. Thanks again to Ryan Schmeiser. You can find more of his writing on medium.com. We'll have that link listed below. And thank you to our sponsor of today's episode, Presence Media. You can visit them at presencemediadenver.com. That link will also be listed below. Thanks for listening.